grave, measured tone. By February 2026, West Asia is engulfed in a sprawling regional war. Following joint military action by the United States and Israel, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is assassinated. The immediate fallout hits the water. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow artery connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, descends into maritime chaos and operational gridlock. Commercial navigation stops. For New Delhi, this crisis has a specific body count. Exactly 28 commercial Indian ships and roughly 800 Indian sailors are currently trapped inside this active conflict zone, sitting on idle vessels. This diagram tracks the physical flow of India's domestic energy supply. 40% of the country's crude oil and half of its natural gas imports funnel strictly through this single, volatile strip of water. For New Delhi, this is no longer a distant geopolitical conflict. Without secure passage through Hormuz, the nation lacks the reliable fuel flow needed to power its cities or sustain its maritime trade. On March 12, 2026, Prime Minister Narendra Modi places an urgent diplomatic call to Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. Modi outlines two priorities: securing immediate safe passage for Indian commercial vessels and guaranteeing the safety of the 800 stranded citizens under Iranian oversight. Pezeshkian issues an immediate counter-demand. He expects India to use its permanent presidency of BRICS, the economic coalition of emerging markets, to actively support Tehran on the world stage. This request forces India into a severe diplomatic corner. Supporting Iran requires India to use its leadership role alongside figures like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, drawing the ire of the West. New Delhi now faces a brutal exchange: whether to leverage its international neutrality to buy the survival of its domestic energy supply. The leverage Iran holds over India relies on decades of deep physical integration. India has built a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure network directly inside Iranian borders. On this map, we can trace a maritime trade route originating in India and landing at Iran's Chabahar port. This node allows India to ship goods north into Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing the borders of its rival Pakistan. India provided a $500 million upfront investment for Chabahar. In May 2024, they solidified their control by signing a 10-year development lease to operate the terminal. Chabahar feeds into the INSTC, the International North-South Transport Corridor. This is a 7,200-kilometer web of rail, ship, and road routes connecting India to Russia and Europe, reducing freight transit times by 40%. Underneath the shipping lanes lies the Farzad B gas field. Discovered by an Indian consortium in 2008, this Iranian site holds energy reserves that dwarf India's domestic supply. Tehran provides the physical bedrock for India's geopolitical ambitions. Without Iran, India has no bridge to access the Eurasian continent. The primary threat to this logistical network comes from Washington. The United States has launched a pressure campaign against Tehran, and India is caught in the blast radius. Washington threatens to impose a 25% additional tariff, a massive tax on imported goods, against any allied country that continues conducting business with the Iranian government. The United States laid down a hard deadline. They refused to extend India's sanctions waiver for operating the Chabahar port past April 26, 2026. India's response has been contradictory. Prime Minister Modi addressed the Israeli parliament just days before the military strikes against Iran, deeply offending Tehran leadership. Yet, quietly, New Delhi executed a financial maneuver. They transferred $120 million directly to Iran to honor their port commitments, rushing the cash through before the American sanctions snap back into place. New Delhi is executing a strategic rebalancing, managing Washington's public expectations while continuing the private funding necessary to keep the Iranian gateway open. If U.S. pressure successfully forces India to abandon its Iranian investments, New Delhi faces a backup plan. China is perfectly positioned for a takeover. Beijing holds massive leverage. They currently have a 25-year, $400 billion strategic and economic cooperation agreement running with Iran. Chinese state-owned enterprises are waiting. They are capitalized and prepared to seize control of the Chabahar port the minute India defaults on its lease. If Chinese cranes replace Indian ones at Chabahar, India loses its physical bridge to Central Asia. This would cement China's logistical dominance over the region. The outcome in the Strait of Hormuz and at the Chabahar terminal will determine which power dictates the flow of goods into Central Asia. It is a zero-sum proxy battle for regional leverage. In the 20th century, India relied on non-alignment, staying neutral to protect its sovereignty. The realities of 2026 make that policy difficult to maintain. Today, India's External Affairs Ministry must navigate the conflicting demands of Washington, Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing simultaneously. Despite the surrounding chaos, Iran has signaled a willingness to negotiate, allowing safe passage for Indian vessels through the blockade recently. But the clock is running out. The April 26, 2026 sanctions deadline is approaching, and India's diplomatic maneuvering room is evaporating. India stands at a crossroads. Preserving its autonomy and its energy grid will demand a high price, depending entirely on which global superpower New Delhi ultimately chooses to defy.